Hello there, and welcome to Wildcard Decks, a channel where I like to showcase some decks and cards that are not on the so-called meta side of things, and I think I've come up with a Yoda deck that is somewhat different to what is being typically used, with one card in particular, which we will get onto later, but a brief overview of what this deck is trying to do. It is stalling, it wants survivability, and it is going to be doing some hand draw manipulation to benefit ourselves. So let's get into it. So in terms of unit split, 26 on the ground and 7 in space, so quite light in both arenas relatively, I guess. There's 23 cunning cards in the deck in total, which helps with Quill's card draw ability, which we'll get onto later. Resource cost, it spikes at 3 quite massively, so we'll get on to C3PO later, but basically that's important to remember. Rarity, so the special cards, so to speak, are starter deck cards, so those are C3PO, who is in set 1, and Razor Crest, who is in set 2. A decent number of rares. On SWUDB, it had the TCG cost as being like $18 still, so even though quite a number of rares and one legendary, apparently it's still quite a cheap deck. So in terms of Yoda himself as a leader, who is really interesting, and I've had a lot of fun playing this deck. I just go with a 30 HP base because I don't see the 2 rare bases as really doing anything for him. But his action, so if a unit has left play this phase, so it could be your unit, it could be an opponent's unit, and leaving play means if it's been bounced back to the player's hand, if it's been captured, or if it's just been defeated. So 3 different things that can trigger this being available to use. You can draw a card from your deck, and then from your hand, including the card that you've just drawn, put a card from your hand on the top or bottom of your deck. So if you're against decks that have got some hand discard abilities or cards to attack your hand, then this gives you some scope to protect important cards by putting them on the top of your deck instead, so they can't be discarded. It combines very well with C3PO, the Foresight upgrade, and Quill, because you can manipulate what is going to be on the top of your deck to then be able to guarantee you're going to be able to draw an extra card. In terms of when you want to put something on the bottom of your deck instead, that's only going to be if it's something that you really don't want and you also have no way of drawing it. So if you've got no C3PO, no Quill, no Foresight, etc., and it's just a complete pot shot, then yeah, put it on the bottom of your deck. But otherwise, if you are going to be able to guarantee that draw, then just put it on the top of your deck. When you do stuff like that as well, and we'll get into hand manipulation in a little bit, you want to think as to what information you're giving your opponent. So the other day, I drew 2 cards in a row, I think, with C3PO, but I'd also used Yoda's ability. So the first card I drew was Concord Dawn Interceptors. I was then, in the next phase, able to use Yoda's ability. I put Concord Dawn Interceptors back on the top of my deck, so then when I used C3PO's ability, I drew Concord Dawn Interceptors, which is revealed to my opponent, so they've gained no new information. So you can play mind games. They might think, oh, you've drawn 2 Concord Dawn Interceptors. Well, actually, I hadn't. I've just hidden what I've drawn with Yoda's ability by putting the Concord Dawn Interceptors on the top of my deck and drawing it again with C3PO, if that makes any sense. So yeah, you can be a bit tricksy and conniving and a bit deceitful with this deck in general. But yeah, it's just really good to filter your hand and get to other cards that are going to be more useful more quickly as well. So in terms of his flip, he's a 7 cost, so quite late, but it's a very powerful flip. Restore 2 is always nice, and he's got an extreme, for such a little guy, he's got a very high health pool of 9, but when deployed, you may discard a card from your deck, and if you do, defeat an enemy non-leader unit that costs the same as or less than the discarded card. So, combined with his leader ability, non-deployed, again, you can manipulate what is going to be on the top of your deck so that you know when you flip him, you know what that cost is going to be. So the other day, I was able to put, I think it was Enfys Nest, who's a 7 cost. I was able to use Yoda's ability to put that on the top of my deck, then flip Yoda, discard Enfys Nest, which then defeats a Maul that had been put out. So his flip ability is extremely good if you're able to manipulate it in the right way. What's important to note is that the hand manipulation is very easy when Yoda is not deployed. When he is deployed, that ability goes away unless you've got Ezra, C3PO, and Foresight out, or any combination of those, because he has none of that when he's deployed. It's just restore 2 after that. So just something to keep in mind. So on to the cards themselves, and this set is basically the hand/draw manipulation set of cards. So we'll start off with Foresight. So this is an upgrade. It's only a 1 cost. Just gives them +2 health, which is okay. But basically, when both players have passed or claimed the initiative, etc., you get to name a card. And if the top card of your deck is that card, then you get to draw it. And then you get to draw the 2 cards as normal. So you're actually drawing 3 cards. Now, this is where you can get tricksy and deceitful, because it says if it's the named card, you may reveal and draw it. So if you've used Yoda's ability, or even if you hadn't, and you do manage to guess it correctly, but you don't want your opponent to know that you're about to draw it, then you could just choose to not reveal and draw it. So you just draw 2 cards. So if you say something like, I guess it's going to be Luke Skywalker, and then it actually is, but you just pretend it's not, then you can just draw 2 cards normal, and then they might think, oh, you don't have Luke Skywalker, I can kill one of your units without a massive bomb coming down. So yeah, you can play some kind of mind games, psychological warfare if you so desire with this. C3PO, so he is obviously the best with Yoda versus any other leader because of Yoda's leader ability. So where I mentioned earlier that the most common resource cost in this deck is 3. If you are playing C3PO blind and you do not know what the cost of your top card is on your deck, then just go with 3, because you're going to hit it fairly often. Because I think it's I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it might be 19 cards in this deck are 3 cost. So you're going to have a decent hit rate if you just name 3 every time. So yeah, and he's when played and on attack. So when you first play, if you play him turn 1, you're going to have no idea what's on the top of your deck. So yeah, just go with 3 costs and you'll probably get something. On to Queel. So because this is a yellow deck, he's on attack. You discard a card from your deck, and if it shares an aspect with your base, return it to your hand. So your opponent will know what you've drawn. But this is where Yoda's ability again, you can put a yellow card on the top of your deck and then attack with Queel to make sure that what you are drawing from his on attack is going to be yellow, and then you get it. So always useful. Ezra Bridger. So he's another part of this whole hand manipulation thing and draw. So when he completes an attack, so that means he has to survive. So if you're attacking into a unit, bear that in mind. If he were to be defeated with that attack, then you don't get this ability. But you get to have a look at the top card of your deck. You can play it if you've got the resources, discard it if you're just not interested in it whatsoever, or not going to be able to draw it, or leave it on the top of your deck. So if you've got C3PO out let's say you've got C3PO out, Ezra out, you would attack with Ezra, and then your next action, you'd be able to C3PO to say what the cost is, and then draw that card because you've already had a look at what it is if you've decided not to play it completely. Similarly, if you've got Ezra out, you attack, see what the top card is, and if it's a blue card that you're not interested in, you might choose to discard it, and then attack with Queel to see if the next card after that is going to be a yellow. So these kind of all link together very much so in that sense. Then R2D2 doesn't fit into this as much, but basically he's just a good status unit for a 2-cost. He's yellow as well, which helps with drawing more cards. And if you're not particularly enamored with your hand at that point, you can discard a card from your hand and then search for top 3 cards of your deck for a card and draw it. And you do not have to reveal what that card is either, because there's no conditions on it. It doesn't have to be a particular cost. It can just be anything. So yeah, you can do a secret draw in that sense. And then the most exciting part of this whole deck and hand draw manipulation mechanic is You're My Only Hope. So this was all the way back in set 1, which was just mostly a Hail Mary, basically, if you were desperate. But with Yoda, because you can manipulate what is going to be on the top card of your deck, then this is suddenly extremely viable. So it's a 3-cost event, but basically look at the top card of your deck and you can play it. It costs 5 less. So basically on turn, when you've got 3 resources, you can play a 5 resource card for free, which is always very good, but it can be even better because if your base has 5 or less HP remaining, so as we're using a 30 HP base, if it's got 25 damage on it or more, then the card that's on the top of your deck, you get to play it for free. But you do have to pay free for the event itself, so it's not quite for free. So we do have quite a few juicy cards in the deck that would be very nice to play for free. And there is also one basically instant win card that you can play with this as well. So yeah, but with Yoda, it's very viable to set this up. And we've got a decent number of 7 costs, like Han Solo. If you manage to get him out when you've got 5 resources, then you're laughing, really. So yeah, extremely good with Yoda. Onto the other ground units that are just there. They're not hand manipulation, although Cloud Rider to an extent is kind of on the hand manipulation side because Ambush is in 1 health, so it's pretty much guaranteed to die. So you can then activate Yoda's ability because Cloud Rider will have left play that phase. So that's kind of it's kind of 50-50. That's one of the main reasons in the deck, and then the other reason is just that it's very good to be able to ambush in for 3 power for such a cheap cost. We've got Little Yoda as the unit to get some restoring for the survivability so that we can get to the later game winners that we want to play. And then when defeated, he does have a draw card ability. Depending on what you're trying to do, if you're trying to set up a You're My Only Hope play, then you're not going to want to draw a card necessarily, because then you'll draw the card that you're hoping to play a discount on. So something to keep in mind. Kanan Jarrus, we've just got him as a decently status unit and to provide a bit more healing, so it helps with the survivability. Chewbacca, so I think from memory, yep, he is the only ground sentinel I've put in the deck. I think most people would go with Obi-Wan Kenobi as the sentinel, which is very valid. But because he's a blue unit, I've opted for Chewbacca so that you're less likely to discard him with Quill. Well, he can't be discarded with Quill, so yeah, that's the main reason I've gone with him. But he has the same health pool as Obi-Wan as well, 1 turn earlier, which I think's useful. And if he's attacked, then he gets readied, so you can perhaps get 1 or 2 attacks in whilst your opponent is trying to get rid of the dude. So yeah, I think it's quite useful overall. Enfys Nest. So we come to our 7 cost and above units on the ground, and she's just ridiculously good. And I mentioned if you get Han Solo down early with You're My Only Hope, arguably you'd be laughing even more if you got Enfys Nest down early, because when played and on attack, return enemy non-leader unit with less power than this unit to its owner's hand. So the earlier you get her down, the more likely it's going to be that your opponent's units have got less than 5 power. So yeah, she's basically a perpetual waylay machine, so just really good in that sense. And she's got Saboteur as well, so let's say they've got 2 Sentinels down. Well, not even that. If it got one Sentinel down, you can just hit their base. Sentinels don't have a lot of power in general, and then just bounce Sentinel to your hand, to their hand, and we're just attacking with whatever else you've got remaining on the field. So, yep. Fennec Shand, so she becomes quite powerful with this deck, quite easily, I would say, because she ambushes in for 4 generally, but on attack deal 1 damage to the defender if it's a unit for each different cost among cards in your discard pile. So Cloud Rider is going to be in there for free, basically. You're probably going to have C3PO as a 2 cost as well. But also, with Queel, he's probably going to be discarding some cards along the way. RCD2, you might have already discarded a card as well. Ezra Bridger, you might have discarded some cards. So yeah, and we've got a decent number of events as well. So by the time she's out, you're probably going to have 4 different costs. So she's going to be hitting a unit for 8. So she's going to be taking out a hell of a lot of different things. So yeah, that's why I've got. I think most people will probably go with 2 of Han Solo or even 3, but because they're unique units, it's not impossible that you'll have some combination of 2 or 3 of these out at the same time. So if you went all in on Han, you're only going to have 1 of him out at the same time. So yeah, you can have both of these out, and their ground arena is going to really struggle. So Han I've kind of already covered a bit, but he basically shoots first. So he ambushes in. If his attack would defeat the enemy unit, then he takes no damage back. So always an extremely good ground clearance control arena thing to do. Not a very good sentence, but you know what I mean. And then our absolute ground bomb is the Zillow Beast. So 10 attack, 10 HP. Realistically, your opponent's not going to be able to kill this unless they've got Fail the Dragon, Rivals Fall, or Vanquish, because when you first play it, it loses every ground unit on the enemy's side has -5 attack, but also when the regroup phase starts, this thing heals 5 HP. So even if they manage to do 8 damage to it, and they're thinking, oh, I've nearly got it dead, well, then it's going to heal 5, and it's only got 3 damage on it. So yeah, it's incredibly hard to kill unless you've got the instant kill cards that I mentioned. So got 2 in here because if you're setting up Yoda's flip turn to discard a high cost card to defeat an enemy unit, then this would be a good choice for that because it's 9 cost, so it's going to kill pretty much everything at that stage. And you're still going to want 1 left over to be able to deploy it later to help finish the game off. Onto the space units. So because we're stalling and trying to basically survive, Concord Dawn Interceptors, all 3 of them, so it's just a very good early space sentinel to have. Attacks for 3 when it's defending, so it's basically a 3/4. You don't really care about attacking into base with it. And then the Razor Crest, restore 2, and then when played, you may return an upgrade from your discard pile to your hand. The main upgrade that you would be looking for is Perilous Position, spoiler alert. So we've got 3 Perilous Positions in the deck, but with Razor Crest, if you end up deploying all of them, then that's basically 6 Perilous Positions, which is rather ridiculous and very useful. And then the final space unit, which can get you out of a jam, is the Redemption. So it's an 8 cost, so very late game, but it's a Sentinel. But the most important thing is when played, heal up to 8 damage from any number of units and or bases, and then deal that much damage to this unit. So because it's got 9 health, you can do a maximum of 8 healing spread across your units and bases. The general play with this is to, if they've got units in space already, heal the amount from your base. That would mean it would still survive an attack from whatever they have in space, but that depends on the situation as well. If you desperately need the healing from your base, then just put all 8 on it, and then it will take 1 attack and still probably kill a space unit because of its 6 health. So yeah, just can get you out of a jam if needed. Onto the events, and I've got 2 disarms in here because it gives -4, so in the early game for 1 cost. You're just going to completely neutralize an enemy's attack and just helps to delay things. And then in terms of removal, because of Queel primarily, I've gone for the cheaper yellow cards of Spare the Target and Waylay. Functionally, they're basically exactly the same. The only difference is Spare the Target, you can also collect the unit's bounties if they have any on it. We have no bounty cards in this deck, so it would only be if your opponent is playing any units that have bounties tied to them specifically, but it's a possibility. So if someone's playing Dr. Evazan, then you can play this on Dr. Evazan and get the refund straight away. You've just bounced a unit for no resources. And then Waylay, as I say, just the same thing, but no bounty collection. Now, onto the wild card, and this might be the most wild card of my wild cards thus far, because it is Final Showdown, double aspect yellow, so it is out of aspect by 1, so it will actually cost 8 in this deck. But if you manage to set up a You're My Only Hope, that will cancel the extra cost out, so you'll be paying it for 6 cost, because You're My Only Hope costs 3. You get the next card discounted by 5, so 8 minus 5 is 3. 3 plus 3 is 6, so that's why I like it in this spot. But what does it do? You ready each unit you control, so ideally you're going to be using this after you've attacked with everything, and then at the start of a regroup phase, you lose the game. So you can only use this when you know you're going to win, or let's face it, if you know you're going to lose if you don't beat them this phase. So they might still have resources that they can play or units they can attack with, but yeah, if you know if they claim the initiative and you lose, then yeah, you just might have to use this as a Hail Mary. Now, I've only played 3 games with this deck, but in both games that I did win, it was a Final Showdown win. Now, I think I was probably on the way to winning those games anyway, but it just means you can guarantee it, and you don't have to worry about misplaying in future rounds or something hitting you out of nowhere that you've not anticipated. So yeah, I do like it in this Yoda deck, and it's not out of the realms of possibility to just play it for its full cost normally, because Yoda is a 7 resource deploy leader, so you're going to be getting to the higher resource amounts anyway. With Yoda as well, because of the hand manipulation and draw manipulation, it's actually quite viable. Even if you draw this quite early, it's quite viable to carry higher cost cards, because you're going to be able to draw higher other cards with C3PO and Foresight and Ezra, etc. combinations. So yeah, I've only just got the 2 of them, so you do need to bear that in mind, but you might find a space for 3, but I think because it's a 1-trick pony, I think 2 is the right amount. You don't want just for 1, but yeah, so that's that. So I think it might be the most outlandish one that I've included in a deck thus far, but seems to have a place in my opinion and experience. So upgrades, the only upgrade apart from Foresight is Perilous Position. I'm sure you know what it does, but 3 cost, -2/-2 to the unit that you put it on, so it's always going to be an enemy unit unless there's some kind of scenario that I can't think of. But and when played, exhaust the attached unit. So again, this just helps with survivability. Shove it on someone's leader, because our leader is a late one to deploy, so in most cases they will get theirs out before. But yeah, just a very versatile card, and we can get it back with Razor's Crest as well. So in terms of other options that I could think of, if you want to go all in on the hand manipulation and drawing cards aspect, then R2D2 is another good addition for this, because you'll get to see what the top card of your deck is. So in the very early game, then you might want to put it to the bottom of your deck, because you're not going to be able to make an extra draw. But if you've got C3PO out, Foresight, all of that, then you'll just leave it on the top of your deck and then draw it when you're able to as an extra one. So if you want a bit more of an aggressive stance rather than perhaps Chewbacca, the Sentinel version, then Syndicate Lackeys comes in with ambush and hits for 5. Might be a different way to go about things. Obi-Wan Kenobi, already mentioned him. You might prefer him instead of Chewbacca as a Sentinel. And then another late game option would be Big Chewbacca himself, because, well, I mean, ridiculously good stats for one thing with grit, but when played, defeat a unit with 5 or less remaining HP. So it's basically a takedown in unit form. So yeah, could be very useful, and you could easily make a case for him being in here. And then I've just put any blue removal cards, but I say I've, because of the yellow aspect and Quill, I've gone with the waylay and spare the target options myself. So the other thing I was thinking about with this in terms of options is, because of your My Only Hope, these are some out of aspect options where you would still be able to play it for 7 resources, ignoring the 25 health thing. So 97th Legion is probably the least exciting option, I would say, but it's just a unit that gets more powerful the more you resource. So you'd be able to play that for 7 cost with, well, all of these you'd be able to play for 7 cost with your My Only Hope, because they are out of aspect by 1. So that's single aspect, single aspect. This is a cunning deck, so the villainy is out of aspect for Cad Bane. It's also a vigilance deck, so villainy again is the out of aspect for Count Dooku, and then aggression for Mace, and then command for U-Wing. But Aura Sing is kind of like a pseudo sentinel, because if enemy ground unit attacks your base, then this unit gets readied. So they are probably going to be wanting to deal with her first before they start attacking your base again. Cad Bane, I think, would be extremely good with this deck, because what you could do is set up your My Only Hope, play it for 7 resources, then flip Yoda. Well, yeah, I've skipped ahead. Play this for 7 resources, capture a unit or group of units that have 8 or less HP, and then if they still have a unit around that you need to get rid of, flip Yoda. You'll probably be going in blind at that point, but you might then be able to defeat another unit as well. So yeah, I think Cad Bane could be extremely good with Yoda. Similarly, Count Dooku is like a smaller Chewbacca in a way, because when played, you can defeat a unit with 4 or less remaining HP, so 1 less HP, but shielded as well, which is always nice. But yeah, you'd be able to play him for 7 again. So yeah, I do. I kind of want to play around. I don't have any Cad Banes, unfortunately. I do have Count Dooku. I do kind of want to play around with these 3 options in particular, as additional unexpected weapons in the deck. Mace Windu, can play him for 7, comes in and ambushes, hits for 5, and if he kills the unit, then he gets readied again, so he can just wipe out the opponent's ground arena potentially. And then U-Wing Reinforcement. Again, you can search for top 10 cards of your deck, up to 3 units with combined cost of 7 or less, and play each of them for free. Now, what would be interesting about this is if you've decided to also include things that are out of aspect, like Cad Bane, Count Dooku, and Mace Windu. The cost for things like this, it doesn't include any aspect penalties, so you would be able to You're My Only Hope into U-Wing Reinforcement, and then if you wanted to, you'd be able to play any of these 3 as part of this, and that would be your full 7 cost that you've utilized from this card. I probably wouldn't go for that, but I'd probably prefer to put a bunch of little units out like Razor Crest and Concord Dawn and yeah, all that stuff. But it's a potential option. But yeah, I think these latter 4 in particular, I think would be quite interesting to try and fit in and just take your opponent by surprise. I think another one, it would be harder to do because you would probably have deployed Yoda by that point, but I like the idea of Supreme Leader Snoke and trying to set that up with You're My Only Hope. Now, it would mean you'd probably have to deploy Yoda a phase later, so on 8 resources. But yeah, your opponent will not see that coming, just a random Snoke coming up in a heroism deck. So yeah, I think Yoda's got a lot of potential for just completely random things coming in and your opponent being like, what in the hell is going on here? So yeah, I think Yoda's a really fun leader to try and experiment with. Anyway, I think that's probably a bit of a longer video, but I think there's quite a lot of moving parts to a Yoda deck, and as I say, I think he's probably one of the leaders that I think there's so much freedom to to build around because, well, primarily because of You're My Only Hope. Um, but yeah, I think there's so much potential with this leader. And I think it might be the most fun I've had with set 3 deck thus far. So anyway, let me know what you think. The videos, well, they have dried up a little bit in the past 2 weeks because I haven't actually played the game as much as I would have liked, and it's possibly going to dry up again a bit over Christmas. I think I do have actually some decks from set 2 that I could revisit that I didn't end up posting because I had a cold, so I couldn't really talk that much. Um, so yeah, we'll see what happens over the next few weeks, but I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe to not miss out on further ones, and I'll see you in the next one.